And a few weeks ago, Canada announced a $78.3 billion deficit in the country. Now, this sparked a lot of controversy at the time, but they're almost over the finish line with getting the $78.3 billion approved. In this video, I wanted to talk about why there was a lot of noise about the $78 billion deficit, why that matters, and how it affects people living in Canada, people like you and me. The deficit, simply put, means the government is spending more money than it's getting. Let's put it into perspective. This deficit, this $78.3 billion one, is 3 times larger than the deficit ran in 2019 pre-pandemic. It's bigger than some provinces' entire budget. It's happening in a year that is not struck by emergencies or any sort of recession. This is why I think this number is causing a lot of controversy and it's getting a lot of noise in the media. And also the fact that the deficit is happening shortly after Mark Carney is taking over as Prime Minister, and it's one of the biggest we've seen historically by a new Prime Minister. Maybe to clear the air on why the deficit is so high, there's a lot of new massive spending. That's the first reason. The budget includes large investments such as infrastructure, housing, manufacturing, economic diversification. All of these adds up to billions of dollars in spending, which the government needs to get from somewhere, and hence the large deficit. Reason number 2 is interest rate costs. Now, if you've noticed, there's been increased interest rate costs across Canada. Housing, car loans, everything's gone up. And interest rate costs going up also affects the government. We're spending over $50 billion in interest payments alone. Higher interest means higher deficits. And number 3, there's been slow economic growth over the past couple months. Heck, over the past few years. When growth slows down, businesses earn less, workers earn less, and the government collects less taxes. The government, however, still needs to keep spending to keep up with inflation, to ensure that things are growing. Less income taxes also means less corporate taxes. So you have to ask the question, where's the government going to get all this money to keep spending on infrastructure development and growth? Deficits. Number 4, the government has been making a lot of political promises with no view of cuts that they're identifying to offset some of these promises that they're making. No government wants to cut programs, no government wants to raise taxes, but they want to keep doing cool stuff. And in order to keep doing cool stuff to help the economy, they have to borrow more money. Closing off, number 5 is just the global uncertainty. There's been a lot of noise in the media with U.S. cutting trade, Canada trying to expand to new markets. That's a lot of global uncertainty. Trade tension, geopolitical risks, and global slowdown reduces Canada's export. And like I said, we have to keep doing stuff with limited revenue across the country. Money has to come from deficits. Now, there's some good to all of this bad news. The 78.3 is a huge number, but it's not all entirely bad. The first good is their short-term economic support. As we know, the country is going through a particularly hard time right now. Housing market is taking a beating. A lot of people are losing their jobs. The economy isn't growing as we've liked. The deficit is a large number, but it's a large number to pump into the economy to keep things moving. It prevents slowdowns, keeps unemployment low, and supports businesses across the country. Number 2 thing to keep in mind is investment in the future growth. If the borrowed money is used wisely, like for infrastructure, energy projects, manufacturing, and transportation, it can grow the economy faster than the cost of borrowing. Hedge your bets against the future. If we invest now on gains for the future, we might come out ahead and profit from all of this. Hang on, I know what you're thinking. What if it doesn't? We'll get to that in a second. The third good is business incentives. Tax write-offs and investment programs funded by deficit spending can help Canadian businesses expand, which the Canadian government has been trying to do more and more, or at least keep up with over the past few years, ensuring businesses don't go under, giving a lot of incentives to ensure new businesses come into the country and new companies thrive. Now the bad, which is where most of the Canadians are actually worried about. Debt is expanding. So 78.3 deficit adds to the national debt of $1.2 trillion, which again, is higher than historically. And bad number 2, interest payments eat up a lot of the budget. I said $50 billion of this, of our current budget, goes to interest payments alone. As debt rises, interest payments rise. Canada will soon spend more on interest alone than healthcare, child benefits, infrastructure, which is an insane amount of money to even fathom or think about. Number three, higher taxes are also likely. With deficits this size, future governments may need to raise prices and taxes if things don't work out generally. Income tax, corporate tax, capital gains, and consumption tax are all at risk if the government needs a way to pay for all of this borrowing that it's doing today. If all the things they hedge their bets against don't make it or don't see a result, then we're in for a big shocker. And bad number four, higher long-term interest rates. The government running a big deficit needs more borrowing. That puts upward pressure on interest rates as a whole for everyone. Higher deficits equals higher yield equals higher mortgages. Number five, which is I think one of the most apparent, is there's not as much flexibility when you borrow money, just like anyone else. If you borrow a large amount against your salary, say you make $100,000 and you borrow $80,000, you're paying back a lot of your salary to ensure you're making that $80,000 payment. However, something catastrophic goes wrong in your life, well, you're all tapped out. You have no money left, so the government is in this predicament. If something goes wrong tomorrow, catastrophically wrong, there's not a lot of options that the government can pivot to or options that they can leverage to bail us out of said predicament. And finally, the point that a lot of people have been talking about, what does this deficit mean for me? What does it mean for you? I'm going to break it down. Now, for workers, government spending may create jobs in trades and infrastructure, but higher long-term taxes could reduce the take-home pay, which is usually evident because the government has to offset some of these costs back somehow if they don't figure out, if interest rates don't go down, if they don't figure out alternative means to raise money, it comes back to taxpayers. And thirdly, the wage growth may slow during high deficits, so people might not see a lot of increased take-home pay because companies are struggling, corporate taxes are higher. There could be a downstream impact for everyone. And number two, the impact is to renters and home buyers. A large deficit increases the risk that mortgages rates stay high, home prices rise slower, and housing programs take longer to roll out because the government is just focused on a lot of other things. And for investors, bond yields rising, volatility in bank stocks, growth in infrastructure companies, pressure on the loonie. And for business owners, there's more grants in the short term, but there's higher interest rates, probably in the long term, which could hurt borrowing and reduce overall proceeds for business. For anyone saving for retirement, there's higher inflation, higher taxes, and lower purchasing power, which affects how much you're able to leverage come retirement or leverage with the amount you've already put away for retirement. Now, in closure, the deficit of $78.3 billion is high. It's one of the largest in Canadian history for non-emergency year or non-emergency spending. It's driven by high spending, low interest rates, and slower growth that we talked about. The short-term benefits, there's a lot of short-term benefits, but a lot of long-term risks. And yes, it will affect your taxes, your rents, your job opportunities, and your investments. The deficit is a bet, a massive bet that the government is making on today's spending that will create tomorrow's growth if it pans out. The question is, will it pay out? Time will tell.